October 2nd, 2019. Jon Jones typed 4 sentences that the entire MMA world laughed at. I can see you're starting to sip your own Kool-Aid. I know how it feels. I've been there before. Only I was around 23. At the time, Adesanya was 18-0, unbeaten, untouchable, the UFC's chosen one. Dana White called him the next cash cow with giddiness in his voice. Fans called Jones jealous, bitter, a veteran threatened by the new dog in the yard.
So he said he'll chase you up to heavyweight, he'll chase you all over the place. You're kind of, you don't buy it?
Come on.
Nobody stopped to ask if Jones was right. 6 years later, Israel Adesanya has lost 4 consecutive fights. He has been submitted, knocked out, and outworked by fighters the world expected him to dismantle. He is no longer the face of the middleweight division. He is no longer a title contender. He is a fighter searching for a reason to keep going. And Jon Jones never said another word about it. He didn't have to. Before we get to the warning, there is one thing we need to establish clearly. Israel Adesanya is one of the most gifted strikers this sport has ever produced. That is not an opinion. That is a factual baseline from which this entire story must be understood.
He's like, in my opinion, probably the very best in the sport at setting traps.
He arrived at the UFC in February 2018 with 80 kickboxing bouts behind him. Not sparring sessions, not gym rounds, competitive bouts. He had won 75 of them. When he walked into the octagon for the first time, he already had a complete striking education that most UFC champions never accumulate in an entire career. He was quickest fighter in UFC history to achieve his first 8 wins, 755 days. He fought Anderson Silva and made the GOAT look ordinary. He fought Robert Whittaker and finished him in the second round to become undisputed middleweight champion. He fought Paulo Costa, one of the most physically terrifying men in the division, and put him away in round 2 like a surgeon removing something unnecessary. By 2020, Dana White wasn't just calling him a cash cow, he was calling him the future.
See what we're working on in Vegas right now. In the next two months, I'm going to unveil the future, not of the UFC, of fighting. I'm going to unveil the future of fighting in the next 2 months.
Sponsors lined up. Puma signed him, the first MMA fighter in the brand's history. Call of Duty, global endorsements, a documentary premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. He had 80 kickboxing fights behind him, a UFC belt in front of him, and the entire promotional machine of the world's biggest fight organization treating him like a once-in-a-generation product. That last part is where the problem begins. Back to October 2019. Adesanya had just unified the middleweight title. He was the new face of the UFC, and he was already mapping out his future, publicly calling his shot against Jon Jones at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas in 2021. He had decided the date, he had decided the venue, he hadn't even made his first title defense yet. Jones read those words and responded with something that wasn't a threat, it was a diagnosis. I can see you're starting to sip your own Kool-Aid. I know how it feels, I've been there before. Only I was around 23. Just don't become delusional, kid. Read that carefully. Jones didn't question Adesanya's striking. He didn't dispute the record. He didn't claim he would knock him out or submit him. He said something far more specific and far more dangerous. He said, I recognize this. I've seen this pattern, and I've lived it. The man who was calling venues and dates for super fights he hadn't earned yet was operating from a place of mythology, not reality. And Jones, whatever his personal flaws, is the greatest mixed martial artist who ever lived. He has seen every version of ego in this sport. He has been every version of ego in this sport.
This is just the most sophisticated of the strikers.
Here is what made the warning so difficult to hear. Between 2019 and April 2023, Adesanya gave people almost no reason to question him. He defended the belt against Yoel Romero, against Marvin Vettori, against Robert Whittaker again, against Jared Cannonier. Clean decisions, clinical performances. When Alex Pereira knocked him out in the 5th round in November 2022, his first finish inside the octagon, he came back 5 months later and returned the favor. A vicious second-round counter right that sent Pereira crashing to the canvas. He had been knocked down, he came back. The narrative was bulletproof, and the UFC made sure of it. This is the part of the story that most people overlook, because Israel Adesanya's decline is not only the story of a fighter who believed his own hype, it is the story of a promotion that manufactured that hype and handed it to him uncritically, then removed the scaffolding when it was no longer convenient. Dana White talked about Adesanya with giddiness. That is the exact word used, giddiness. The UFC built their next era around his image, his style, his anime references, his dancing entrances, his content creation. They needed him to be untouchable because an untouchable Adesanya sold pay-per-views, moved merchandise, and filled arenas on multiple continents. When a fighter becomes the product cannot be questioned. When the product cannot be questioned, the fighter stops developing.
Israel Adesanya will fight anybody, anywhere, anytime, and the guy likes to fight 3 times a year, even though he has the belt. You know, a lot of these guys get the belt and start making that really big money.
That is what Jones saw in 2019. September 10th, 2023, UFC 293, Sydney, Australia. Adesanya walked into his home crowd as a -650 favorite. Sean Strickland, a fighter nobody outside of hardcore MMA circles considered a genuine threat, proceeded to outwork him for 25 minutes. Every round, every judge, 49-46 across the board. What happened next revealed everything. Adesanya himself later admitted that Dana White had warned him before that fight, told him to slow down. Listen, kid, you got enough money, just chill out for a while. Adesanya refused. He wanted Sydney. He was stubborn. He went in and absorbed the single most damaging loss of his career. Not because Strickland was better, but because Adesanya was no longer evolving as a fighter. He was performing a character. And Strickland, with no character to protect, simply worked. And the Kool-Aid had been sipped. August 17th, 2024, UFC 305, Perth, Australia. Dricus du Plessis caught him in the 4th round with a face crank submission, the first submission loss of Adesanya's professional career. A fighter with 80 kickboxing bouts behind him, a fighter who dismissed grappling questions for years with anime references and swagger, tapped out on the canvas. Jones had pointed to the grappling gap in December 2021. He said Adesanya would have been ground and pounded to death if they had ever shared the octagon. Nobody took it seriously. Du Plessis collected the belt. February 1st, 2025, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Nasruddin Imavov. Not a household name, not a former champion, a technical, disciplined fighter who had studied the gaps and exposed them. He stopped Adesanya by TKO in round 2. 3 consecutive losses, all by finish, each one progressively more damaging than the last. This is where the Jones warning becomes undeniable. Adesanya's problem was never his striking. His striking remained elite. His problem was the same problem Jones identified in 2019. He was sipping his own Kool-Aid, and the UFC poured the glass. When you are the product, you do not get hard conversations. You get accommodations. You get favorable matchmaking. You get promotional machinery that frames every performance as brilliant, even when the cracks are already forming. The UFC positioned Adesanya as the next Anderson Silva, the next Conor McGregor, the crossover star who transcends the sport. That positioning required the illusion of invincibility, and illusions have a cost. The cost was developmental stagnation. Adesanya's wrestling never meaningfully improved across 6 years as champion. His grappling defense, exposed by Jan Blachowicz at UFC 259 in 2021, was exposed again by Du Plessis in 2024. In between those 2 losses, the UFC never built a narrative that demanded he fix the problem, because fixing it would have required admitting it existed, and admitting it existed would have cracked the mythology.
Listen, he's the middleweight champ. He doesn't get the light heavyweight title. He doesn't fight Jon Jones. But you know what? You can never hurt somebody for thinking big and trying to become great.
Jon Jones built his legacy on a ruthless commitment to eliminating weaknesses. Wrestling, striking, grappling, cardio. He worked every dimension of the sport because he understood that at the highest level, one exposed gap is enough. Jones had his own flaws, his own chaos outside the octagon. But inside it, he was always evolving, always diagnosing, always adding something new. He saw Adesanya starting to believe the story being written about him, and he told him directly. Adesanya laughed it off, called Jones jealous, told him to wait his turn. This story has been told before. Different name, different division, same ending, Anderson Silva. The greatest middleweight in UFC history by any metric, dominated the division for a decade, won 16 consecutive fights, became so deeply embedded in his own mythology that when Chris Weidman knocked him out in 2013, while he was taunting, while he was performing, nobody had prepared him for the possibility that the myth could end. The UFC had protected that myth too. When it shattered, Silva never fully recovered. Adesanya was supposed to be the corrected version of that story. He had Anderson's footwork and timing without the recklessness. He was supposed to be smarter, but the machine builds the same myth every generation. It just changes the name on the poster. March 28th, 2026, Seattle, Washington.
If Izzy loses this one, I think that'll be the end of his career.
Joe Pyfer stopped Israel Adesanya in the second round, a fourth consecutive loss. A record that was once 24-2 now reads 24-6. The man who danced into arenas as the last stylebender now fights in non-title bouts on fight night cards, searching for a version of himself that may no longer exist. He said after the loss that he is not done, that he is not leaving. And perhaps he is right. He is 36 years old. Careers have been rebuilt from worse positions. But here is what cannot be rebuilt. The years spent performing a character instead of developing a fighter. The years the UFC's promotional machinery spent polishing a myth instead of identifying and addressing a reality. The years Israel Adesanya spent hearing that he was untouchable instead of hearing what Jon Jones told him in 2019. The Kool-Aid wasn't self-poured. It was served to him, repeatedly, by a promotion that needed him to believe it. Jones wasn't jealous. He wasn't bitter. He was the one fighter in the world who had lived inside that machine long enough to recognize exactly what it does to the people it chooses. He saw it at 30 years old. He said it out loud, and everybody laughed. The belt is gone, the title shots are gone, the mythology is gone. What remains is a fighter at the end of his prime asking himself why it all unraveled so quickly. Jon Jones never said his name again. He didn't have to. He already said everything that needed to be said in October 2019. Nobody listened. If you want more breakdowns like this one, subscribe, because this conversation is far from over.